Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 10th of April 2014. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, Tiny Thief takes the loot and runs, Borderlands the pre-sequel announced, and The Last of Us Remastered on PS4 is accidentally leaked on the PlayStation Store. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. Tiny Thief was a game that received great acclaim on mobile devices and did come to Steam back in 2013. However, its publisher Rovio Stars has now decided to change its business model, taking with it the content that people actually paid for in the first place. The original title cost $2.99 on mobile devices. However, Rovio Stars has switched the payment model over to freemium, which involves the first 3 levels consisting of 5 stages each being available for free, and then everything else costing $1.99 a piece, or $5, that being $2 more than the original game cost, in order to acquire them all as a bundle pack. Now, this sounds reasonable when you think about it, except for the fact that those that bought the full game involving all 5 of these levels can now only access 3 of them once again. Attempting to restore purchases does not work for those that bought the game originally, and added to that, the game now has ads on the pause screen. Those of you looking for a refund on Android devices can go through to the My Orders page of the Google Play Store, click Report a Problem, select an option, and attempt to request a refund. It seems like Google Play is offering refunds for this title. But how on earth can this even be legal? I mean, talk about a bait and switch. I don't see anything wrong with switching your business model later down the line. What I do see a problem with is pulling content that other people actually had access to. Now, there were 5 sets of levels originally, and there's a new 6th one, which obviously you wouldn't expect to have access to if you'd bought the game. It's reasonable, of course, to sell extra content later down the line, that's fine. But you would expect to have access to levels 4 and 5 because you paid for them in the first place, so cutting those off after the fact is a huge dick move. Bear in mind, of course, this was snuck in via an update, so most people that did update the game had no idea that this was going to happen. If you'd held on and not updated, then you would still have your full game available. It seems like it would have to be some kind of mistake. It's just that ridiculous. However, this was reported on 4 or 5 days ago over on Pocket Gamer, and they requested a quote from Rovio to see, what on earth was going on, and Rovio just didn't bother to reply. So, as it stands, we have an awful lot of people that are now lacking pieces of content from the game that they just bought. And I'm sure in some jurisdictions that has got to be illegal. Certainly on the Google Play Store, it's grounds for complaint, I would think. You can flag the game as being deceptive, which, as far as I'm concerned, it is, but it's retroactively deceptive. It wasn't when it first came out. It was being sold in a reasonable fashion, and now it's not. The strange thing about this is that it seems like a deliberately malicious move. There was already another version of Tiny Thief available, Tiny Thief Lite. In fact, it is still possible to download that version if you do it through Amazon, bearing in mind that you can actually install apps on an Android device without using the store, which is one of the advantages of that platform. But Tiny Thief Lite still exists and it's free. That's the kind of thing that you would think would then go freemium. That would make sense, but throwing the freemium business model on top of something that you've already sold to people is hugely malicious. Not even a question about that. The sad thing about this is that it really gives freemium a bad name. I think the way that freemium is done for most iOS games is actually fine. And it's one of the better business models on offer for a market that really doesn't want to pay for stuff, at least not initially. The free-to-play model, well, that's where the really scummy stuff ends up happening, and that's where game design is compromised. But if you were to look at some titles that say were on DS, like Phoenix Wright or Ghost Trick, those are all games that use the freemium business model on iOS, and it actually works out fine. Freemium is basically shareware from back in the day, only they've apportioned things off a little bit more where you can pay as you go, instead of just saying, oh, right, okay, well, I played the first episode of Doom, now I buy the whole thing. You could actually then buy the 2nd episode of Doom, and the 3rd episode of Doom, or the whole thing, and you could save money if you decided to put down on the whole lot. That is absolutely fine. What is not okay is taking away content that people had in the first place. Oh, wow. I don't know why I'm surprised. It's not like Rovio has a great reputation, but It would annoy me a lot if they got away with this simply by virtue of being a really big and rich publisher. This is the kind of thing that both Apple and Google should be cracking down on hard. And it's not the first time that this kind of thing has happened. This just happens to be the most high profile of titles that has done it. Unfortunately, it would seem that the developer distribution agreement that people sign up for when they put the games on the Google Play Store does not really cover this situation. Section 3.3 is the closest to that, saying that you may also choose to distribute products for free. If the product is free, you won't be charged a transaction fee. You may not collect future charges from users for copies of the product that those users were initially allowed to download for free, but they haven't mentioned anything about modifying the title after the fact. It certainly seems to me that the terms of service would need to be updated for this, because I could imagine if Rovio gets away with it, plenty more unscrupulous developers will happily pull that bait and switch on people. Borderlands, the pre-sequel, has been announced and will be developed by 2K Australia as opposed to Gearbox, although Gearbox will supposedly be overseeing the project while working on some as-yet unannounced next-gen IP. Randy Pitchford of Gearbox has stressed that this is not Borderlands 3. It is a pre-sequel, and very much was okay with saying that it was more of the same. However, it's not DLC. So it's not a sequel, but it's not DLC either. Alright. Sounds a little bit like Batman Arkham Origins, actually, as far as I'm concerned. Now, for those of you who don't know who 2K Australia are, well, there's a weird story behind that, because they were part of 2K Marin, then they were spun back off again to 2K Australia. They helped with the development of Bioshock Infinite, and now they are working on this one. It'll be released on PC, PS3, and 360. There are no plans for a next-gen version of the title as of yet. So basically what that means is it's probably going to look exactly the same. However, the game is set in space, and there are a couple of mechanics related to that, including the O2 system, which requires you to fill up your O2 levels in order to not suffocate and die, as well as being able to do oxygen-powered jumps and shoot the helmets of certain enemies to watch them suffocate in certain areas, of course. The game will feature 4 new playable characters, one of which is a claptrap, because God knows they can't stop running that joke into the ground. And it will tell the story of how Jack became the villain he is today, at least in Borderlands 2 at any rate. Well, more Borderlands is going to be good for a lot of people. It's a bit weird that they're not releasing it as DLC, considering that Gearbox is extremely DLC heavy when it comes to the Borderlands series. There are 45 pieces of DLC available for Borderlands 2, with a grand total price of $151.55 if you were to buy them all separately. A lot of those consist of various little pieces of nonsense here and there, gear and all sorts of things like that, and skins, but they released a lot of DLC for that game, and I thought they released quite a bit for the original. They took the cake with Borderlands 2. So it's a little bit surprising, but I suppose you could also say, well, this will be a new platform for yet more DLC, because you're going to sell less and less DLC the longer you go on with a game like Borderlands 2, because it's getting older. There's that obvious expectation of things being included in the Game of the Year edition, which they were, and then they started making more DLC, which wasn't, which is like, argh, that's just insane. So yeah, I guess they are making a new platform for DLC, assuming that it does well. I mean, it might not. This idea of coming right out of the gate and saying that it's kind of a halfway house of a sequel, it's really not Borderlands 3, doesn't show a huge amount of confidence in the title, which does worry me a little bit. I understand that Gearbox aren't the ones developing it, so maybe they're just not willing to stake their reputation on the work of somebody else, but there are a great deal of people that don't believe a sequel should just be more stuff in a different setting. Personally, I am okay with it. I don't mind. I said so in my Origins video as well. I'm like, look, there's more Batman and it's of pretty much equivalent quality, then great. Yeah, that sounds fine. Some people would disagree with me when I say it's equivalent quality to the previous titles, but with a Borderlands game, yeah, more of the same would be okay for a lot of people. It wouldn't be okay for me, because honestly, there are some pretty key and core changes that I would like to see made to the Borderlands series, especially when it comes to the way that enemies are handled in multiplayer mode and their bullet-spongy nature, which really kills my enjoyment of that game in almost any FPS, really. I don't know if they're going to do that, which worries me a lot, but it is quite nice that a new studio has a little bit of control over it. They may be willing to make some large changes to it. And for my personal enjoyment, that really has to happen. Otherwise, I probably just won't bother playing too much of this one. The new setting may help in terms of the variety of places to go. Admittedly, Borderlands 2 was definitely better than the original Borderlands in that regard, but it could simultaneously limit it an awful lot. The inside of bases and the outside of rocky moons can get a little bit dull after a while. But since the game has just been announced, we don't know exactly where everything is going to be. By the looks of it, one of my chief complaints, though, is not going to be addressed. The fact that there is only one activatable ability for every class, and that the gunplay does get very samey after a while without the addition of more abilities and things that you can actually do there. Maybe the additional elements will help. They're adding 2 more in, possibly, but it does definitely seem like more of the same. That'll be okay for a lot of people, probably not for me. I'll obviously keep an eye on it, and there will no doubt be a video when this thing eventually comes out. And finally, The Last of Us Remastered, something that really has not been a particularly well-kept secret. It's been rumored for a long time. It is the PlayStation 4 version of The Last of Us, and it popped up briefly on the PlayStation 4 store before being taken down, offering a pre-order for the title. So I'd imagine they're going to be announcing this very, very soon indeed. In fact, it may very well be officially announced by the time this video comes out. Not really a big surprise that they would take one of last year's most successful and acclaimed titles and throw it over on the PS4. Would it be a system seller for some people? Potentially, certainly. Admittedly, a lot of people did buy a PS3 just to play that game. For me, it's actually pretty good news, because there is the possibility that that game will, in fact, receive perhaps revised control schemes, considering you have that touchpad in the center. That might be helpful, it might not be, we'll see. And hopefully an increase to 60 frames per second, considering that The Last of Us on PS3 was struggling to even maintain 30, which really exacerbated the problems that I had with the controls being very loose, very clunky, and sluggish. An increase in frame rate would probably do a lot to alleviate that, and I would like to enjoy The Last of Us, a critically acclaimed title, but I just could not deal with those controls. I couldn't. It's also, of course, nice to see a game that was extremely high fidelity on PS3, and obviously one of the most impressive-looking PlayStation 3 games to ever have been released, given a little bit of next-gen makeover. The question is, how much are we going to see? Because if this is already being announced, then this is coming out, one would imagine, fairly quickly. How much time have they really had to revamp it? Did they start doing that before the PS3 version even came out? Did they start afterwards? They've been working on DLC as well, so how large is the team that's been working on it? And more to the point, how big a change, how big an improvement are we really going to see? If the game isn't hitting 60 FPS, then I'll be really disappointed, honestly. One of the nice things about upgrading to the next generation is that you can take titles that just didn't run very well on the previous gen, up-res them a little bit, polish them up, give them 60 FPS 1080p treatment, and increase the texture quality and then just throw it onto the system. That is okay with me, honestly, because I want to be able to enjoy those games, and I struggle to do so if it doesn't run very well. One would certainly hope that this is not merely slapdash. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch, but before I go, let us return to OC Remix with yet another fantastic track. This is a remix of Darksiders 2. Or is it? This guy threw a little bit of Chrono Cross in there for good measure and created what's a really nice medley or mashup between the two titles. It starts off pretty creepy. It's by the remix of Brandon Strader, and of course the original composer for Darksiders 2 is the phenomenal Jesper Kid. It is a medley of Chrono Cross's Scars Left by Time, and then of course Darksiders 2's Plains of Death and Puzzles. Enjoy this one, folks. Download it for free in the description below this video, and I'll see you next time.